Mideast is on edge, watching the bitter face-off underway right now between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Over the weekend, the Saudis executed an Iranian Shiite cleric. This execution sparked Iranian protesters who then set fire to the Saudi embassy in Tehran. And now the Saudis announcing they are severing all ties with Iran. So what does this deteriorating situation between Iran and Saudi Arabia mean for the global fight against ISIS? What does it mean for President Obama's efforts to help end the civil war in Syria? And what does it mean for us? Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador John Bolton, goes on the record. Good evening, sir. Let's start with the last question. What does this fight between Iran and Saudi Arabia mean for us? Well,
fundamentally, that's the most important question, and I think it reflects the increasing likelihood that there could be real conflict between the Sunni side of the Muslim world, led by the Saudis,
What's a
and
real
the Shia
conflict?
side.
I think they're already having a conflict. What's a real conflict in your mind?
Well, I think the next step up is from burning the Saudi embassy in Tehran to inciting subversion and sabotage among the Shia population in the Saudi eastern province, which is where the bulk of the oil is, or in Bahrain, which has a majority Shia population, or in other Arab oil-producing monarchies. I think we're really on the verge of this escalating dramatically.
All right. Iran has been supporting Assad in Syria. Saudi Arabia has been supporting the rebels who are fighting Assad. We have this January 25th meeting in Geneva where we think we're going to end the civil war in Syria that has already left 250,000 civilians dead. So now what?
Zero will happen at that meeting. Look, the president is responsible for leading us into this situation where he said for 4 years that Assad has to go, but he was never willing to take the steps necessary to make it happen because he felt that so doing would risk his chances of getting a nuclear deal with Iran, which is the principal supporter for the Assad regime. So our policy has been contradictory, but it has helped foster the impression that the United States wants to see a different balance of power in the region, to tilt toward Iran, simply corroborated by the Vienna nuclear deal, tilt toward Iran and away from the Arabs.
I think we'd have a completely different discussion. I don't know if it's a better one, but a different one, had that Iranian deal been treated as a treaty. Just like we treated the deal with Russia, the arms reduction with Russia in 2012 as a treaty. President Obama couldn't get a treaty through the Senate. I got that. Couldn't do the two-thirds. Is there any way the GOP could have forced that into being considered a treaty?
Well, if they had been willing to take the steps necessary to overcome close to 70 years of the Senate giving up its treaty ratification power, and I asked that question of a number of senators at the time, it was clear they were not willing to have that fight.
Why not? You don't have to look at it as a fight, but rather, the 70 years we've sort of denied deals between nations as a treaty. Why don't we sort of, resurrect that instead of deny it?
Well, the first thing you have to do is get the president to submit a treaty. This is not a piece of legislation that's fundamentally controlled by the executive branch, and if the president says, well, I'm not going to submit it as a treaty, what's the Senate going to do? It then has to resort to holding up appropriations for the State Department, not confirming nominees. That's a real fight, to get the president to submit the document to the Senate to begin the ratification process. They were not willing to do that.
All right. Saudi Arabia must have known in executing that Shiite cleric that this was going to happen in Tehran. They had to have known that.
I don't agree at all.
You don't think so?
I fundamentally don't agree.
You think Iran would have just said...
He's a cleric. Isn't that sweet? A man of God. Certainly,
I'm not saying it was... I'm not saying that,
But let's focus on this. Not saying that he might not have been an agent of Iran stirring up trouble among the Shia population. He was a citizen of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and I'll tell you this, I bet he got as much due process from the Saudis as a Sunni cleric in Iran would have gotten in a similar situation. But let's assume it was a purely arbitrary execution, a violation of human rights. What gives the Iranians the right to burn the Saudi embassy?
I'm not defending Iran at all. What I'm saying is that if they'd kept this cleric, I'm just asking hypothetically, if they kept this cleric in jail forever and not executed him, we'd probably have a little different picture tonight. I'm not saying that the Iranians are right in any way in burning that embassy.
Well, it seems to me that if a country can't carry out its own judicial policy without risking its embassy being burned, that's got to say something. And I'll tell you something else. This demonstrates the utter contempt that the Iranians have for the Obama administration. Don't they think that in a country that saw its diplomats captured in 1979 and held for 444 days in violation of the great international law, that might spark a reaction in this country when they go and burn another embassy.
What's the reaction?
They could, well, the Obama administration called on everybody to exercise restraint. They are laughing in Tehran tonight. They've got this administration exactly where they want them. And that's only going to feed Saudi and other Sunni Arab fears that the United States has abandoned them to the tender mercies of the Ayatollahs in Tehran.
Ambassador, nice to talk to you, sir.
Glad to be here.